We are live.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, I am Monica A. Coleman.
And I'm Tananarive Due, and welcome to Octavia Tried to Tell Us. Octavia told us.
Surely she did. We love seeing you in the chat.
Hi, Lisa Farrell in Atlanta. I know Lisa. Good to see everybody. Ashley, Natasha, Laura, Marilyn. Thank you for coming, all of you.
Let us know where you're from. We have a great guest today.
We do.
know you're going to love it. So I'm just giving everyone a chance to get in since we're just getting started. You know, this is our 20th Octavia. Is it 20th? 19th. 19th Octavia Tried to Tell Us. And we are still in a pandemic.
I know. I don't think any of us imagined we'd still be here in September of 2021.
We did not. We felt that light of the vaccine hitting us in late spring. And yes. We still are.
Yes, we are.
And I feel like in some ways we need this more because we have this kind of weariness, right? Mm-hmm. So it's still so much anxiety, still so much grief and loss, but now we're tired. And now we're feeling the long-term effects of in our society, of ourselves, and our families, right? Of what it means to live with this kind of grief and anxiety. And now a little, strife about public health.
And the solitary nature of people's struggles, because if you're not in the healthcare industry and you don't have people with COVID in your family or COVID impacted, because some ERs you can't get anything treated or get treatments because of COVID, it's as if the world has gone on without you, which is that's a hard feeling.
Yeah, it's just a tough time. And so we are so glad that we have inspiration from Octavia on how to move forward. And we have these really wonderful guests who are likewise inspired by Octavia, who can share with us some of their journey, their experience, and how we are all trying to live and survive and do community in these days.
Absolutely. So welcome to this community. And we have a terrific guest coming up.
All right, so great. Here we go. I'm going to start with, I have my slide presentations.
Just so you remember, those of you who are new, we'll introduce ourselves to you.
So you will see we have new colors, a new logo. You can find us at octaviatry.com.
Isn't that beautiful? The book turns into a road.
It's so cool.
It is so cool.
It's so cool. So we'll share our time together by doing some introductions. We'll have our conversation and, as always, our questions and answers.
And don't forget to tag us on social media at #OctaviaTry. That helps other people discover the webinar series and they can watch the replays.
And sometimes we have really fun parallel conversations there as well.
True.
I am delighted to introduce my friend and my colleague, Tananarive Due. She is an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She's an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary, Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. A leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years, Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, and a British Fantasy Award. And her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies. Her books include Ghost Summer, Stories, My Soul to Keep, and The Good House. She and her late mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stevens Due, co-authored Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. She is married to author Stephen Barnes, with whom she collaborates on screenplays. They live with their son, Jason, and 2 cats.
And joining me is the Reverend Dr. Monica A. Coleman. Monica A. Coleman is a professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. She's also an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, an initiate of traditional Yoruba religion. She works at the intersection of faith, culture, and social justice. She's the author or editor of 6 books and several articles and book chapters that focus on the role of faith in addressing critical social and philosophical issues. Her book, Making a Way Out of No Way, A Womanist Theology, is required reading at colleges and universities around the country, as well it should be. And her memoir, Bipolar Faith, A Black Woman's Journey with Faith and Depression, received the Silver Illumination Award in 2017. Dr. Coleman speaks widely on religious pluralism, religion, and mental health, sexual and domestic violence, and navigating change. She lives in a lively intergenerational household where she is an avid vegan cook and cyclist.
Now we get to introduce our guest for today, Sister Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs. She is a queer Black troublemaker and Black feminist love evangelist and an aspirational cousin to all sentient beings. Her work in this lifetime is to facilitate infinite, unstoppable ancestral love in practice. Alexis is co-editor of Revolutionary Mothering, Love on the Front Lines, and author of Spill, Scenes of Black Feminist Fugitivity, Archive, After the End of the World, and Dub, Finding Ceremony, and numerous articles and essays. Alexis's work has inspired artists across form to create dance works, installation work, paintings, processionals, divination practices, operas, quilts, and more. Alexis is the founder of Brilliance Remastered, an online network and series of retreats and online intensives serving community accountable intellectuals and artists. Alexis' work with her primary collaborator, Shango Dare, has shown the world a queer Black feminist love ethic and practice. Over the past 11 years, they have nurtured the Mobile Homecoming Project, an experiential archive amplifying generations of Black LGBTQ brilliance, which has consisted of listening tour of the United States, 7 intergenerational retreats and pilgrimages in the Southeast U.S., a media and audio archive of many Black feminist LGBTQ elders. Alexis was recently in residence as a National Humanities Center Fellow, funded by the Founders Award. During her residency, she is writing The Eternal Life of Audre Lorde, Biography as Ceremony, forthcoming. Her book, Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, is a series of meditations based on the increasingly relevant lessons of marine mammals in a world with a rising ocean levels, and is a part of Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy series at AK Press. We are just delighted to welcome today Alexis Pauline Gumbs.
Yay. What an exciting bio. So many interesting and amazing things. And it's so funny to hear Adrienne Marie Brown's name because I was just texting with her, a great admirer of her work. So, of course, connected to Adrienne.
And she's a friend, of course, of Octavia Tried.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is one of our earlier guests.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. You all, I'm over the moon. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, one of the things we love to ask, and what I didn't get when I shared your introduction, is about your love for Octavia Butler, which you share the wider world. So I guess our first question we want to ask is, when did you fall in love with Octavia Butler?
I think I was about 12. So I came to Durham, North Carolina, which is actually where I live now, for what I call summer nerd camp. But it was a enrichment program at Duke. It was a regional enrichment program at Duke. And Charles McKinney, the great historian Charles McKinney, was at that time a graduate student who taught an African-American history course for this enrichment program. And he had us read Wild Seed as to understand the Middle Passage, and it was phenomenal. It was
that
brave.
was my first too. Wow.
That was your first too?
Yes.
Yeah, it's still my favorite. I love that book so much, and that's when I fell in love. I was just like, wow, you can see even with my current and most recent work with Undrowned and the marine mammals, Anyanwu becoming a dolphin never left me ever. I think it lives, as they say, rent free in my mind to this very moment. So that's how I fell in love. And I think about, I think about what it meant for Charles McKinney to say he's a historian. He was teaching a class that was a history class, but he understood that Octavia's work would be important for us to be able to think about time, for us to be able to imagine what the Middle Passage may have been like. And Octavia has been helping me to time travel really ever since then.
Well put. And I know Octavia would love to have the opportunity, if she had lived longer, to explore that work with marine mammals with you, because she obviously did feel that kinship and felt that was very important. So we're not just trying to save this planet for ourselves, which was part of, what was driving her, but really we're trying to save the planet for all the creatures who live on this planet.
Yes, all the cousins.
I like that, the cousins.
I mean, that reminds me, right, of even how in Parable, right, Lauren feels not just what other people feel, but what other animals feel, right? With she feels what everyone can feel around her as part of her hyper empathy syndrome. And that's something I know. I even, when I see construction happening and then part where they take down trees, like I can't, like it really. I get that Alice Walker feeling, right? Like it's like cutting off an arm or something. I mean, it's strong language, right? But it's like, no, like, it's alive.
Yeah. When that crack happens at the heart of the tree, you can feel it. You can feel it. And I mean, I think that's actually a truth that Octavia is claiming. The fact that hyperempathy moves across species means that feeling across species is similar enough, right, to move through us all.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me go to your pandemic story, if you don't mind. I mean, it's like really the story of two pandemics, or maybe more than two, really. So I'm going to start with phase one, when we were all like, oh my God, what is happening? That phase where you couldn't find toilet paper, where we didn't know what the future was, where we had such just terrible leadership. I'm trying to find the right words.
Just a mess.
And leadership is not one of the words, but where we had no leadership. So we're dealing with isolation, terror for our existence, terror for the existence of society. How did you cope in the early pandemic? And were there any lessons from Octavia that were helpful to you?
Wow. Okay. So what's really deep is that where I was when we really got a sense that a pandemic was starting was at Toshi Reagan's Parable of the Opera.
You at UCLA?
In Los Angeles. Were you there?
I was there too.
So they were like,
that was my last public event.
That was my last public event too. So
oh my gosh.
1,000 people.
Wow.
Trying to touch elbows and like.
Girl, I hugged somebody. I was so paranoid about that for the next 2 weeks.
So many people hugged. It was like, because it's like a family reunion. Like
one of my former students, right? I was
like,
hey. And I was like, it's kind of warm.
Oh no. The bathroom lines were long because everybody was singing happy birthday and washing their hands, whatever. So it was yes. So that's where I was. And it was interesting because I've followed the opera. So I've seen it premiered. The US premiere was here in North Carolina. I was there. I saw it in New York. We went to LA specifically to be there for that. And as soon as our plane landed, California was like, we're under a state of emergency.
That's what she said. She said when she landed, it was just like she had walked into Parable.
Yeah, exactly. So we're all sitting there and we're listening, like for me, listening to the opera and seeing the opera in a different way, just because it was like, oh, wow, this is now, this is right now. And then everything shut down. So basically we got back here to North Carolina and quarantined immediately. And that began that phase of trying to figure out, the toilet paper and everything else you mentioned. So I was grateful that Octavia contextualized the entire thing, like that I came home and I was like, okay, here we are. Octavia did tell us, and we are doing all the things, checking on our go bags, all our preparation, all our food storage, like all of those things. And not only through the uncertainty of the early pandemic, but also then moving all the way through the year, through the elections and what felt like a possibility of civil war. Through that entire time, Octavia is like right here, right here.
Yeah.
And parable for sure. But I would say, because Wild Seed is such a guiding text for me, also the Patternist series, also thinking about Anyanwu's relationship with her body and with healing and with viruses and with learning. I was really thinking about, how am I relating to my body in this time? And I don't have the adaptation superpowers, of this character in the book, but I know I'm in the adaptation because I'm actually interacting with a different life form and a different form of living, different social forms, all of that was happening. So yes, Octavia absolutely helped. And what also helped was just writing and looking out the window. I live on a high floor of a building, and just like studying the skies and relearning the stars and thinking about, what does it mean to navigate through this logistically, but also spiritually for me. So yeah, that's to time travel, a shorter time travel, just to the early pandemic. That's where I was. That's what I was feeling, and checking in because the update that I know, at least that we know of, is that nobody did get sick out of that 1,000 people gathering that we were both at, thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. Yeah. But it was an act of faith. Nalo Hopkinson came with me, and she was like, there were 2 cases at UCLA. I mean, this was like so far long ago. And I said, oh, but they were negative. They were false positives. And I'm thinking, like, so what is, like later on, because I'm a hypochondriac. So for the whole next 2 weeks, I was just in terror, that I had been at a super spreader event. But thankfully, it was not. And it was such a guiding moment too. And what a way to transition between spaces of the past and the present. It was just like, usually it's a longer process, but that was like one day we're like in the past is gone. Like everything that was familiar was gone very quickly.
Yeah.
So how have you maybe adapted? I don't know if we're still in the grab the go bag, right, situation. Although we might be,
always.
Right. I mean,
I know
different than usual. But now that we're in, I guess this is almost like U.S. pandemic round 2, right? So we had a couple glorious months of feeling like, okay, and that's really very, only a couple countries could even say that, right? Who had this kind of access to the vaccine. Before, Delta variant is rising up, and we are now in, a different place, because there's a kind of weariness, right, that people are experiencing, and resistance, I think.
Yeah. And frustration with difference of opinion. The inability to understand the thinking of people we have to share spaces with.
Yeah, that's so true. I was just listening to this story. Have you all listened I'm listening to it because I love LeVar Burton's podcast, and, I'm just a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, Reading Rainbow, anybody? Right.
It's like, this is iconic, but there's a story that he read. I'm actually only halfway through it, so I don't even know what happens, but it's called Vaccine Season. And the premise of this story is that, one of the major premises of the story is that the vaccine, a group of billionaires make a vaccine that's actually transmissible, because, people don't want to take the vaccine and people don't want to wear masks. So then the vaccine becomes contagious, and then people who don't wear masks catch the vaccine. I was
love
that's
it.
Brilliant.
That is brilliant.
The technology for that exists.
All right, scientists, can you do that?
I mean, the ethics are, complicated, but an airborne vaccine.
It looks like the author's name is Hanu Rejanami.
That's right. Exactly.
That name right.
Yes, that's the story. But I was thinking about that. People definitely have different beliefs and they're taking different approaches. How I've been adapting. I mean, it's interesting because I would never have described myself as a socially anxious person in the before times, because I'm just constantly around people and, I just have learned to be around people. But this extended period of isolation and then slowly going back into spaces with other people has made me realize maybe I was socially anxious the whole time. I just never had time to notice that I was, I don't know. But I'm thinking so much more, about boundaries, about intentionality, about what it means to be in relationship when you always have to decide. You have to decide if you're going to see anyone's face. You have to decide if you're going to be anywhere near anyone. It's a decision and not just something that happens and then we navigate, right? And I think part of what that has taught me about myself is that I'm now learning what consent is. Like I have not related to, and just, growing up as a young woman, I didn't have a sense that I had any control over whether people were near me, right? Or that if I created a boundary that anybody would ever respect it, like that is something that really had me be completely, my partner and I just completely be isolated for so many months of the pandemic, because I was like, if I social distance means I can't make everyone else socially distant from me. They have to actually stay away from me. And I don't have an embodied memory of people staying away from me just because I want them to stay away from me. That's not something that I've experienced, and a lot of women have not experienced that. That's part of the way that gender is constructed in our society. And so there are so many different ways that manifests. Like, oh yeah, I don't consent to being seen by people. People just see me and I got to deal with it. There are just crowds of people and I just got to navigate it. People always, are trying to move me out the way and I just have to deal with that. And none of that is natural. All of that has been created. No. And in this time, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm getting to learn what I even want. How do I want to relate to people? How do I notice what my senses are telling me about possibilities of intimacy, closeness, sharing, being attuned to how I feel about the small differences, even within a very aligned community. Sometimes people are like, yes, I'm hugging with a mask. Sometimes people are like, no, I'm not hugging, but I was yesterday, but today I don't feel because this happened. We're all managing so many different stimuli and experiences, and there's not a source of information that has some kind of if everybody just does exactly there's some basics that if everybody does those things, it will help. We know that, but there's nuance to it. Right. Like, how do you actually live? How do you decide how large your pod is? How do you respond when people in a pod then start adapting differently, and then they have to make different agreements? All of that is in process. But I feel like my major adaptation is actually giving myself space to feel my yes, my no, my close, my stay away from me in a way that I never even knew was possible.
I love all of that. And this question of boundaries, it works both ways. I'm trying to be more of a self-advocate. Like if I'm uncomfortable, to say I'm uncomfortable, and how do you approach someone? I almost want to start carrying masks with me because I love movies. Okay. I admit I have been going to movies and I've had experiences where for 2 weeks after a movie, every little tickle, I think, oh, I should have told that lady put that mask on, or to the point where now I just want to buy extra seats like on either side of us.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to worry about, not everybody can do that, and it's very expensive to do that. But also I remember once, right after the vaccine, during that period where we all thought, oh, thank goodness this is ending. I wanted to take a selfie with someone, and I was like, oh, come on, take off your mask. And later I was mortified that I had asked someone to take off a mask who had hesitated for a moment, and I didn't even think about it in the instant, right? Because there was this false sense of security after having the vaccine, when of course you have to wait and feel out everyone else's boundaries. And I felt so silly afterward. I don't even think he noticed, to be honest, but I was just so angry with myself later.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate this conversation about our having to hold together boundaries and the self-advocacy part. Because I know that's even hard for me. Sometimes I'm like in a setting and I'm like, can you maybe pull it up above your nose? That's what I want to say. I know. Especially if I'm in like a service setting, like this is the cashier, this is the person serving food. And I want to be like, either I need to go or you need to, like the mask below here.
It's not above the nose.
Right. And so I want to be like, could you maybe, but how, like, how do I say that? How that will be received? Am I going to get my food still?
And then the fear of violence too, which we see all over social media.
Right. Or you're like, come on, it's the law right now in many states, the states I'm in. If you're indoors, you have to be masked, but if the mask is below your nose, so you kind of want to be like, well, I'm going to stand back here, but could you also maybe, right?
Right.
For those of us who are teachers, right, we are empowered, whatever this means, right? As one person in a classroom of X number of students to, at least in my institution, to say, oh, well, if you don't have your mask on or don't have it correctly, you can leave. You have to go. Right. And I'm like, you realize it might be easier for some instructors to say than other instructors. Some might be more respected in saying that than others.
Yes.
Right. And so these things are just ever on the mind. And so I'm like, just everyone mask properly by default. Can we start with the high boundaries and then go lower if we feel more comfortable? Like, assume the answer is no until it's yes. Right.
Yes.
That kind of thing. But I really would love to chat with you about teaching, Alexis, because you have really creative and really committed grassroots ways of teaching, and you taught in many different contexts. So I'd love for you to talk a bit about teaching and how how you might teach her work, or even how her work factors into the ways in which you teach.
Oh yeah, I love that question, especially because, shout out to my teacher, Charles McKinney, for showing me like, this is what you do. You teach Octavia's work in any discipline. It's relevant, I think that one of the great things about teaching Octavia's work, and so I've done it in a few ways and in a few settings. So the first way I think was like a potluck. It was a parable potluck series that I had here in Durham. Of course,
in the before times.
The way before times. It was like before pandemic, but it was also before Parable of the Sower, the opera. We just would like bring food and we would talk, chapter by chapter about Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And I mean, what I realized was were two things, because I've done that with a lot of books by a lot of different authors. And in Octavia's work, there's so much to learn. There's so much that's practical. There's so much that people can relate to, and it really can tie into, farming and food justice and obviously emergency preparedness, but also, church building. There's all these things that she's addressing in that series. But at the same time, it's like so stressful. It's really hard for people to come back, because it was a voluntary space. It was not the same thing as like a class that you sign up for and then you have to come. It was like, no, we're gathering, bring your food, come. And it was interesting for me to notice like, oh, sometimes just the potluck is not enough support for what it actually takes to face the reality of what Octavia Butler is writing about in the Parable series. And it was interesting, you know, it was like an interesting challenge. And then it was so incredible because Toshi decided to premiere Parable, the Sower, the opera here. We had all these different community initiatives and so many different ways for people to engage the work through the music, through actual seed saving practices and creating go bags and having community. And I think what I saw was having those multiple forms was really helpful. And that's what I would say. People teaching Octavia Butler's work, multi form is helpful. And also just the timing, 2016, post 2016 election, or even during that election season, people were a lot more like, okay, this is stressful, but it's not more stressful than this actual news that I'm watching. So, you know, the urgency obviously sped up for people because they started to see the things coming to pass, but also people were just so panicked and stressed out anyway that it was not a far leap. It actually felt like supportive help to have Octavia there. And then the other way, what's interesting that happened at the beginning of the pandemic. So before the pandemic, I used to teach on Zoom all the time because I created this, you know, counter Black feminist university, and the way that I would do my intensives and courses would be with people all over the world, and we would meet on Zoom often. And then I would do things here in my local community in Durham. And so as soon as everyone then got on Zoom because of the pandemic, and in true air sign fashion, I was like immediately over it.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was like, okay, well, that was fun. Like, there's got to be another way. And of course, I had been adapting all along, but I started to really see the value of asynchronous courses because people's lives were, first of all, that's something I didn't even say when you asked that first question. I was not able to understand time. Like, I was not able to be on time for something. I was not able to distinguish what day it was. I was like, I just lost that. And that had been something because before the pandemic, I was somebody who traveled a lot and had a lot of meetings and scheduled a lot of things, had been a huge part of what I did. And then I was like, what is happening and what is time? But also understanding that what people were working through to be present was so much, and that the generous thing to do would be have people be able to engage it whenever they can engage it, like how you all have done with this webinar. You know, I think that the value of that really elevated in my perception at that time. And so I created a course for Octavia's birthday. I guess there were two. So, but the main one, the God is Change immersion was just like, what if Octavia was your life coach, you know? And it's these different modules where, her work and my relationship to her work and my complicated relationship with like disagreements that I have with her about the fate of our species, that, you know, ultimately she's proving right all the time now. Now I'm right. Like, oh, okay. I was a lot more optimistic.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much we can't predict that she seemed to know.
Right. I'm like, she really did. Her pessimism was accurate. But also just her sociality and evidence of boundaries. And, you know, I know that I'm not somebody who got to actually socialize with Octavia Butler and see how she moved through space, but from stories that I've heard, and I'd love to hear more stories, there's a specificity, you know, a way of moving through the world that came from her asking herself questions about what life she wanted to have. And so what if we all did that for ourselves? And especially at a time of adaptation, like what we are living through in this moment. how could that be supportive? So, and that's still there. I mean, I launched it on her birthday in June, but it just lives because, I mean, we can always use some support from Octavia. So,
well, you know, one thing, and that sounds fascinating. That sounds like a fascinating course. What lucky students you had for that. In fact, where are those modules? Because I need to see them myself.
I'll send it. Yeah.
But I can say I did not know Octavia super well. My husband, Stephen Barnes, knew her very well for more than 20 years. We drive her places and they'd have dinner at each other's houses. And the one time I was in her house, she was a very gracious hostess, you know, serving us lentil soup and bread. She was a vegetarian. But I do know that she was protective of her personal boundaries, almost as if like we were already having COVID. because I remember, I think it was in 2004, like a Black to the Future event in Seattle when my son was very, very young. I wanted to come in for a hug, and she said that she was just getting over a cold, you know, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll keep my distance. And then later I heard Walter Mosley tell the exact same story at a symposium. And I thought, maybe she just wasn't a hugger in that sense. And I don't want to make a blanket statement and say she never hugged anybody, but I do think that as someone who was a bit of an introvert and who was a bit shy and had to teach herself how to be a public person, of course it makes sense that you're using all the energy you have just to be present, just to be face forward, which, you know, we get that from Zoom fatigue, never mind when you're in an actual physical space. So it makes sense that you're not going to be able to like grab everybody who wants to grab you. So it's like, I'm getting over a cold is maybe that's something I need to bring in for myself, you know, even for people who don't believe in COVID, maybe they still believe in colds.
I like that. That's amazing to hear. Like, it takes something, right? And I think this is part of what I was speaking to earlier about the adaptation that I'm in. Like, it takes something to even create a strategy where you can avoid a hug. It's just not, we're not socialized that that's a consent point. But of course it should be. Like, somebody's holding your whole body. Like,
well, it's very similar, right? Because you can teach an individual this, but you have to also teach others, like society, this, right? So that's something I've been very big with my daughters. Always like, can I hug you? Can I give you a kiss? Can I whatever? And like, you know, in helping her with other people, like, you don't have to hug people,
right?
But then to tell people, stop asking her to hug you,
right?
Like, she has to greet you because that's polite, but there are many ways to do this. You know, she can wave or she can hug or things in between, right? But it's really so huge, right? Wakanda salute, right? But it's really getting other people who, and I think many people aren't thinking about it, aren't conscious of it, right? I don't think it's malicious intent, right?
No,
to be like, how can I invade your personal space? But you know, so it's a whole acculturation, right?
Yes.
Just like we're in a kind of acculturation, some of us are now about boundaries, you know, about masks, about, you know, it's a consciousness kind of raising to say, oh, now that I think about it, I should ask people, right? You know, if I can hug you, shake your hand, whatever that might be. Not just because of COVID, but because it's your body in your space. Right? And we know that's different culturally. Some cultures are closer, right? Close talkers, right? Or some people are like, no, we're good over here. I can be fine, right?
And there's this faith and trust we have to establish with each other. You know, Nicole Bahari was recently a guest, and she talked about being on set and having to work and be intimate and hugging or kissing other actors. And you really are having to trust the system, the testing, and put your life almost in the hands of other people. So that's sort of what we are all doing, even if we're not actors.
Yeah, and I think I just so appreciate Octavia's work. I mean, Parable series, but for sure the Patternist series, and, you know, definitely Lilith's Brood. Like, it is helpful in teaching us how to think in scale, right? Because I think that she did this so many times. Like, okay, if we take this, she's like running models, you know, through all of her works, and saying, yeah, individual people have their dynamics, and there's always going to be the interpersonal dynamics there. but what's happening is never in the full control of any one of these protagonists, right? It's always happening within a system. It's always requiring understanding that what's happening on the individual is happening on this larger scale of the small group of people working together, which is happening on a larger scale of the greater context that they're in. And I think that I wouldn't have been able to articulate this when I was 12 and first started reading Octavia Butler, but now, like, oh, this is actually a primer for unlearning individualism.
Yeah.
Which by extension means it's actually a way of unlearning the American dream, the American story, you know, the whole thing of the rugged individual whose destiny is just a matter of their will and their actions. That has always been a myth, right? Interdependence has always been the case, even when there's this narrative that has been plastered over it. And I feel like each of Octavia Butler's works unravels that. Like, you get some of the most amazing, powerful, strong individuals. Like Lauren Olamide, talk about a rugged individual. Like, come on. Like, I want you on my team in all forms of apocalypse. And yet, you know,
right.
That's not the scale on which life happens. It doesn't happen on the scale of even individual with foresight and reflection and preparation.
But it's rugged individualism in service to larger ideas. And really in service to, what if it said, instead of the pursuit of happiness, which is great, the pursuit of harmony, right? How different would that be?
Yes.
Can we be happy and harmonious at the same time?
Right. Or would harmony make us happy? Right?
Yes. And that's where clearly we're seeing that in culture in the United States is missing the boat, you know, so that even nations that don't have the access we have to vaccines, who are envious of the access we have to vaccines, have a totally different mindset about community. In Asia, in Africa,
New Zealand.
Notions of community are very, very different.
Yes. Yeah.
And all of Octavia's characters in one way or another are all about building community. I mean, book by book by book, literally. And Dawn, repopulate the earth, build this community. Rebel the Sower, I'm going to build this community. Pattern Master series is in its way also is about building community.
And though it's not a choice.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's like it's never a choice.
In each of those instances,
true,
like,
you're forced.
Like, you are forced.
Yeah, it's like you must. Like, this is like it's somehow the ultimatum is
like
offered.
literally, right?
Yeah,
it's like
community,
this is your only option.
Die. Yeah, which is the reality, right? But she has to create these narratives where it's like, okay, if aliens take you into the space and you're the only one left and you have to go into this thing, like, then how does this person build community? Or, you know, if you have to get on the road because your whole community has been burned down, or if this is the only way you can operate against, you know, Doro, this soul sucking super monster of a being, you can't break him yourself, right? Like, it has to be a community effort. And yeah, I agree. I think that's the major lesson, but I think it's also telling that for Octavia, it's not just like something that someone chooses. You know, it's not like in Kindred, she just chooses that she's gonna act in the interest of other people in the past who don't share her self-interest because, but they're my ancestors, so they have to exist. So I have to act on, you know, like it's, and that is the reality that we're all in. But what does it take for Octavia Butler to have people who are socialized within the United States to see that interconnection? It takes extreme circumstances, right? In each case, it's an extreme circumstance, but then you have to see it, the reality that was already there.
I mean, that's been such a huge lesson for us, right? I mean, I think and then, for us here, I think with Octavia Tried and that we're wrangling, right, in U.S. society is this issue of community. How much are we going to care about the other, right? About those who are around, those who are different from us, those who are like us, and how are we going? Because I think it's really shown, particularly for people who are quarantined, right, or in isolation, really craved and realized how much, even introverts, right, you still need some kind of community. And how fitting that technology has really helped with so much of that. But the different ways we're going to form community. But that really is kind of the heart of a lot of what we're wrangling with. And we've tried to form here. I mean, we feel like we do this because this is community for us, right?
This is the purpose of this series.
Is life-giving for us. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I love it. I was thinking about it poetically when I saw the new logo and the image. I was like, Octavia Tried gathers the Octavia tribe. Like that's that's what you all have been doing, and I love it. I'm so here for it.
Well, it's been, I mean, selfishly, it's given us so much too, and that's the joy, is to find things that are helpful to you that you can spread to others and share with others. So, and hear input from people like you who have such great perspectives.
So how are you doing community now? And how are you doing anything, I guess I want to say seeds, right? Seedlings, whether they're actual seeds or seed type things. What is that for you I can't even say moving forward, but as we live forward in what we're in now?
Yeah. Well, in a way it's so literal. So I never have been able to keep plants alive, as a person in before times who traveled so much. I wasn't able to do it. Now I mean, you can't necessarily see, but I have like a house full of plants that are thriving, except for one. But anyway, most of them are thriving. The other one,
there's always one.
I'm concerned about it. I'm like, I guess I don't know what I'm doing. But that has been transformative. So just my plant community inside, our plant household inside of our house. And then Earthseed, which is also the name of a land collective, a people of color land collective here in Durham that my partner and I were founding members of, and is now held by this group of folks. And there is Tierra Negra Farm, and we're part of that farm share. Literal seeds in the ground, like literally being able to grow in that space has been phenomenal. And through the pandemic, it was like the safest possible thing, because we're outdoors, we're all masked, we are on the other side of a row of corn, or whatever it is, and we're interacting in that way. And it really changed for me, being someone who, the way I was experiencing community was, often potlucks inside my own house, and then leaving that house to go build community with all the different people all over the world, and then doing the things that I was doing on Zoom for my primary sociality to be like harvesting garlic somewhere near someone else was transformative. But then we had these incredible long distance rhythmic conversations that I love. And so it's just continued to be part of how I'm in community. And then the other thing is that we are in the process. We're stewarding land where we're incubating our all ages interdependent assisted living community here in Durham, North Carolina, the Mobile Homecoming Trust. And so literally we're creating in a grove of trees and on a space that's 11 acres that has plenty of space for a whole bunch of people to make a wide circle away from each other and be in the same space and held by the trees. And I didn't know that trees would be so much a part of what I think of as my community, but trees certainly are. And
it sounds like you're building your own Earthseed community, sort of.
I mean, that's kind of
right. Yeah. I mean, I think that I think that it always has been, but it's almost like, well, the acorn phase of it, is part of what's happening on the land itself. But it's interesting because we have been thinking about, obviously, because we're people who have read Parable years ago, that it's like we know the limitations of acorn, and what does it mean to be networked, right? Because there are so many folks who have been drawn to fulfill on visions that are community visions, that are interdependent, that are also interdependent with land. We are committed to networking that and saying, okay, like how can this be a way of life that grows and that we support and sustain each other, not because it's like, okay, these 12 people, like that's it, but because we understand that we're collectively adapting what life means and that we're learning the lessons of what interdependence has been here to teach us all the time. If anybody would, look at a forest, but now,
True.
now, COVID has given us our own Octavia Butler experience to put it in stark perspective, just like all the Octavia protagonists.
Wow. That is fantastic. Meanwhile, I have a neighbor across the street who has a Trump 1 flag flying, and I do not feel safe.
Yeah.
Well, let's all go to Durham and
Please come.
live on the land
Wow.
and harvest garlic.
That's just so different. So different.
But it feels so peaceful too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how long have you had this community? When did this start?
Oh, Earthseed. So it started before we ever named it Earthseed, but I'm trying to think, like maybe 2010.
Oh, wow. You've been
So
at this.
collaborations started, but then actually the 40 something acres that is Earthseed land that's collectively held by Black and Latino people, a group of Black and Latino families. I think that's been 5 years that has existed. Tierra Negra Farm has existed for 10 years on different pieces of land. So it's all things come together. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's about practice. And one of the major learning things has been like, who holds what, we're all adapting, but part of even what I was talking about earlier, the getting like, what is it that I want? What are my boundaries? What are the things that I didn't know were choices that I now know are choices that I'm either going to make or not make? I think it gives us an opportunity to really clarify our roles in community and our priorities. Like, do I want to be a person who lives in a grove of trees or not? Do I need to be a person who lives in a grove of trees and also has a tiny apartment in the middle of the downtown of a small southern city?
What is that?
What is it? And what can I do? What will I do? And I'm realizing there's a distinction between that and what I thought I should do conceptually, that it's moved so much into the reality. It's moved into my body. And it means, because I can't do everything that our species should do, that I have to be in collaboration with other people, that I have to be honest and humble about my interdependence, because there are a lot of things that need to happen in order for our community to adapt. I, as an individual, cannot do all those things in the same time in one life. So I have to trust. So I have to grow, all of those things. All of those things are happening as they should be, though, because this is what life is.
So inspirational.
It is. I was like, I'm so inspired. Even the questions you're asking, right? What can I do and what will I do? And I think for so many of us, this time period has helped at least crystallize what even the question right before that, right? What do we need?
Yes.
Right. Realizing, I need more boundaries, or I need more alone time, or I need more community, right? Or I need to be near the water, or, whatever it is. I think all these things that we took for granted, perhaps, that we just had access to. We can now think, this was something I didn't need, or this is something that wasn't just a want. Like, this was something I need to be whole, right? And so just these questions, and then the way you're living them out are just wholly inspiring. And I really want people to know how to get to your class. So give me 1 second here.
There we go. And that's a fantastic picture, by the way.
I love thank that you. Sophia Iqbal Doucette took that picture, and just to shout her out as like one of the world shapers, because she has this whole plant medicine. She had these plant allies there with us when we had a photo shoot. She obviously worked with the wind itself to make that picture happen in the
she's a conjurer, of some kind.
There was no electric fan. It was like literally the wind had to do exactly that to my hair. And for her to catch, and the sun was setting on my face. Wow. It was like that.
Beautiful.
So Sophia is an amazing person, and they made that miracle happen.
So this is a class you've been telling us about?
Yes.
And I'll share here, and you'll see the link. We'll make sure we have the link accessible in a way you can click on it when people need to. This online course offers unpublished writing exercises, archival insights, and multimedia portals into Octavia Butler's practice of shaping change to support you and us as we process through this time of individual and collective adaptation. And that's at shangodare.podia.com/Octavia.
Yes,
fantastic.
Welcome Octavia Tribe.
Love it. We're a family, connecting here.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, it's bittersweet because we lost Octavia so soon, obviously. Yeah. But when I see how her seeds have sprouted in the many different ways her seeds have sprouted, it's very clear that she is actually still here.
Yes.
And that's the important thing. So I'm grateful for people like you for reminding me of that.
Oh, it's beautiful. And you both inspire me so much. So it's wonderful to be able to be in the flow and pour back.
Well, we're so glad you joined us today.
I'm so grateful. Thank you all for creating this space, and thank you for looping me into it. I've been benefiting from it, with all the different iterations of the webinar. And maybe I should have said this, but I'm just saying thank you, because the people that you've had on, Moya and Toshi and Adrian, it's also been a way to have my friends beamed into my living room, right? Having a wonderful, lively conversation with y'all, which is like what I miss. So it's just been such a gift.
Great. Well, we feel the same way. So
we do.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, so wonderful.
She's fantastic. So I've been monitoring the chat and love all these great conversations and the sharing. Thank you so much, Laura Sullivan, for all the sharing you've been doing in chat with the various links, and all of you for your participation and love for this webinar series, which has really been sustaining for me as well.
And so I want to tell you a little bit about how we have tried to continue to hold community in Octavia Tribe, and that's with the Shaping Change community.
Yeah, this is an ongoing community. It actually meets the week after Octavia Tribe every time we have an Octavia Tribe webinar. And it's like the chat, but your face is there and you can actually talk to us and each other. And in this community, you learn the 7 steps of Octavia's method of shaping change. We have an ongoing discussion, of course, of Octavia Butler's work and influence. The Shaping Change e-journal with monthly writing prompts where you can just check in with yourself and really process some of these emotions through writing. Interaction with us that is more personal, and a social media group to build community. And as a sign-up bonus, we have a recording I reference often of a conversation that Steve and I had with Octavia in the year 2000 that you get to listen to.
So you should be able to see it here. You can just click on it. Here's a great word from one of our community members, Erica. She says, from kindred to wild seed to her penultimate parable of the sower duology, Octavia Butler demonstrated the philosophy of gathering community. When we gather virtually for shaping change, we are honoring and practicing what Butler gifted to us, building our singular voices and talents and sparking the talents of one another as we witness, bear, and activate change. We just have a great time.
Yeah, we do, and I see John in chat, and John is absolutely a regular in the webinar. So I can't wait to see you next week, hopefully.
So you can find us and learn more at octaviawebinar.com.
Yeah, so check it out there, learn more about it, and
love to have you join us.
Would love to have you join us. Thank you so much for being here today. Tell your friends about Octavia Tried using our hashtag in social media, and if you'd like to share the conversation you just saw, that will be up on our Octavia Tried website soon, very soon.
Right. And as you're registered, you'll get it first, and then we'll pop it up on the website a little bit later. So there are benefits to being live and registering because you'll get the link first.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I do want to mention that a lot of people are commemorating the anniversary of 9/11 today in their own ways. We didn't really talk about it today because that's a private journey for all of us, but I felt I did want to mention it. Thank you so much for coming, and we will see you next time.
We will see you next time.